We begin this morning with the federal government's proposition of an 18-month extension to the National Assembly for the implementation of the Petroleum Industry Act. The proposition is in line with its plan to defer planned removal of fuel subsidy to alleviate the sufferings of Nigerians. Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timothy Silva, told State House correspondent that the decision was taken to create more time for all necessary modalities to be put in place to cushion the effect of subsidy removal. The Petroleum Industry Act, which made provision for the regulation of the oil and gas industry, was to kickstart next month, but government says it will continue to make provisions for the subsidy.
Following extensive consultations with all key stakeholders within and outside the government, it has been agreed that the implementation period for the removal of the subsidy should be extended. This extension will give all the stakeholders time to ensure that the implementation is carried out in a manner that ensures all necessary modalities are in place to cushion the effect of the PMS subsidy removal, in line with prevailing economic realities. The President assures that his administration will continue to put in place all necessary measures to protect the livelihood of all Nigerians, especially the most vulnerable.
And following the suspension of fuel subsidy removal, the Nigeria Labour Congress has now suspended its planned nationwide protest. The protest had been scheduled to hold on Thursday, January 27th and Wednesday, February 2nd, but the Labour Union called it off after a virtual meeting of its National Executive Council. President of the union, Ayuba Waba, says members of the NLC will be demobilized following the decision to suspend the protest. Before the rally was called off, there were queues gradually building up at a petrol station amid fears of a hike in pump price and the impact of the rally. A lot has happened in 24 hours. That's why they say 24 hours is a long time in politics.
It really has happened. We've had a complete flip-flop. I think what we like to call here is a policy somersault, which is never a good thing, I have to say, for any administration. When the people cannot take your word as your bond, when in the next 5 minutes you could just, completely renege on a previous statement. Never mind the fact that that's a practical thing to do. Someone like you has been saying for a while that we were definitely not going to suspend or end fuel subsidy before an election. But that's all the more reason why the idea should never have been mooted, much less announced formally by no less a person than the Minister of Finance, who announced it repeatedly and even talked about 5,000 naira palliatives, and all that has really just gone down the drain. So I really am concerned about that, the messaging, the inconsistency, and just the inability to actually trust one's government. It is a problem. And about the PIA, the whole point of the PIA, which, the presidency did have the deserved victory lap about it, being the one administration to break the jinx, all that too is now looking really hanging in the balance at the moment. Is it actually worth the paper it's printed on? It was all very well and good last year when the president gave his assent in August, and then in September, wrote to the National Assembly requesting some amendments. Those amendments were about board composition, non-executive directors. Instead of 2, let's have 6 for geopolitical balance. Minister of Petroleum and Minister of Finance should not be on the upstream regulatory commission board, things like that. About board composition, board confirmation by the Senate, that was okay. But this kind of a massive amendment, 18 months, is a really long time. And it just really sends a bad signal, I fear, to the investors that the PIA is supposed to attract. Because if this can be amended, then what else is going to be amended? What other flip-flops are we going to see? And I think the administration needs to do a lot of reassuring on that score, that what they were just trying to do was not create unnecessary hardship for Nigeria, but that Nigeria is still a perfectly good place to do business and come in and invest. That has to be communicated very, very clearly. A lot of people are happy now, especially our labor unions, that this protest does not have to continue, that the Nigerian public is not going to be facing unnecessary hardship. But IMF is insisting that these fuel subsidies have to go. Well, I say IMF can insist till they're blue in the face. IMF is not a political party standing for election in 2023. So we all know the practical considerations that have been taken here. And now the Minister for State, Timipere Silva, he said, before subsidy can come on, right, they've decided on 18 months, which of course remains to be seen whether the National Assembly will give the rubber stamp or query that 18-month timeline. He gave specific considerations. Revival of the refineries, which we cannot forget was a campaign promise. The Muhammadu Buhari administration takes its bow in 2023. We do not have our refineries on board, and it's shameful. He only mentioned the Port Harcourt refinery, that by the end of this year, we're going to see some movement with the Port Harcourt refinery. But even that will still not be at full capacity. He then mentioned the Dangote refinery, which we've learned will be up and running by September. He talks about alternative fuel, CNG, which is his project that he's been really campaigning. And he said that we're going to see the process commence in March or April of this year. Commence. That could have many connotations. What does that actually mean? Where are the 1 million cars that we were supposed to have started off with? And that's just a start. It's all very worrying. And then the palliatives. Where's the Ministry of Finance going to find these palliatives? So even the 18-month roadmap looks quite bleak at the moment. And the bottom line is that this has been kicked down the road and it's the next administration's problem to deal with.
Dr. Batu?
Okay, my view is that this is all about politics, pragmatism, survival of the, the ruling political party in power and government. Timipere Silva was asked the question pointedly whether this is about the 2023 general elections. And he said no, that what the president wants to do is to put structures in place. Okay, what structures are they putting in place? Beyond what has been done within the province of the Petroleum Industry Act. The Petroleum Industry Act prescribed February 2022 as a takeoff point for the implementation of that particular act, particularly with the deregulation of the downstream sector. Now, instead of implementing that law and following the timelines provided in that law, we were told, oh, the subsidy will be removed in July. So they shifted the goalpost. Now they shifted the goalpost further. So say, oh, look, we need 18 months to be able to look at the issues. There's no guarantee that 18 months from now, that the APC will be in power. In another few months, the Nigerian people will be in a position to take a decision whether, the APC should remain in power or not. So what they have done, technically, the present government, is to take a decision for the next government of Nigeria, to create a boo-boo trap for the next president of Nigeria, whether that next president is from APC or from wherever party. And I said it yesterday, that this is some kind of a clever by half attempt to protect the legacy of President Muhammadu Buhari. No president wants to be remembered as a person who imposed a hardship on the country at the very last minute. So this is what this is all about. However, the National Assembly has been mentioned. The government says it will approach the National Assembly, ask for an 18-month extension. This National Assembly that is headed by Ahmad Lawan and Femi Gbajabiamila, who have both confessed publicly that their loyalty is to the president of Nigeria and not necessarily to the Nigerian people, because if you say our job is to support the president, then you are saying that this is a rubber stamp assembly. So if that proposal goes to the National Assembly, you can be sure it will be endorsed. And that will be unfortunate, because that will be also an attack on President Buhari's legacy. Because if we were to construct his legacy at this point, one of the things we'll be saying will be that, look, this is the first government that has dealt with the issue of the petroleum industry, oil and gas sector, that have been on the table since 1999, for more than 2 decades. We've been on this matter. The only man who managed to push the needle is President Buhari. There is also now the same man who is trying to reverse whatever progress has been made. The people of Niger Delta were not happy with some of the provisions of the PIA, but it was passed, endorsed, and the argument, the general received opinion, was that, look, okay, let it pass. It can be further amended. So to such persons, to hear that the amendment is based on the expediency, then of course they will not be impressed whatsoever. So this is about expediency. This is about what is convenient. This is about collusion so far between the legislature and the executive, to deceive the Nigerian people. So I don't trust Chief Timothy Receiver when he says this is not about the politics of 2023. It is. It is, and it amounts, as I said yesterday also, to a postponement of the evil day. Now, what is the other issue to consider? It is simply that this will create a lot of diffidence among international investors. They have, I think they've discovered oil in large quantities in Namibia. Angola is also doing very well, with their oil and gas sector. So it's not as if Nigeria has a monopoly in terms of supply or investment opportunities in the African continent. So we've been talking about, PIA, part of the objective is to increase investment and all that. What they have done with the oil and gas sector, with all these political statements, is that we have deepened the level of uncertainty in that sector. International investors, would not be keen about, investing in either the upstream or the downstream sector of Nigeria. Because what they have seen is policy somersault, policy inconsistency. And we have argued severally, that, look, if you have this kind of policy inconsistency regime, the people who will suffer at the end of the day are the Nigerian people. All the opportunities that the PIA is supposed to bring on board have now been suspended for 18 months. And there's no guarantee that the next Nigerian government or let's say the next Nigerian president, not government, because you can still have an APC president who thinks that, look, this whole thing about PIA is monkey business. So you set back the Nigerian people, and we are going to calculate it ultimately in terms of poverty being deepened in this country. Because you will have robbed the people of opportunities, you will have robbed the people of potentials, you will have discouraged international investors, and you will have shown that this Nigerian environment is not an environment that you can rely on. They passed a Petroleum Industry Act. Somewhere down the line, they say they are asking for 18 months extension. The next president can even ask for another 2-year extension. And if he has the National Assembly on his side, they will extend it. And they will mortgage the future of Nigeria further. So this, in my view, are some of the issues involved, in addition to the fact that the Bretton Woods institutions have been saying that, look, Nigeria or developing countries, as I pointed out yesterday, would have to remove subsidy and move what is provided as subsidy to the health and social care sector. They are very specific in that regard. And the question to ask is as follows. When you extend this subsidy regime beyond 6 months, beyond July, where is the money going to come from? Okay, the money will come from further borrowings.
Of course. And
the same rubber stamp National Assembly will say, we stand by this administration. They will rubber stamp it. Who is going to pay for that additional borrowing? And then, of course, maybe you take money from AMCON assets. You sell national assets. And who is going to pay for that? It's ordinary people like us who are perpetually looking for how to have water in the morning, how to get electricity in the morning, and how to drive safely on the road. We ordinary people of Nigeria, we are suffering too much. And it is not good for the government of Nigeria to further deepen our anguish and our suffering and our pain. No, you are not one of us. So don't look at me.
I'm one of you.
Are you suffering?
Are you suffering?
I'm a woman of the people. Thank you very much.
Dr. Batie, we're at a conundrum. And we have gotten here because of hypocrisy and lies. We tell ourselves too much lies in this country. I remember last year when crude oil prices fell so hard, less than $40, less than $30 per barrel. Some people came out to say that we had pulled out subsidy then. And petroleum prices at the pump went down. That was when it was reversed to 161 naira. And they said month on month it will reflect what was going on in the international market. It is obvious that was all lies. This will impact our economy badly. In 2021, we spent 1.15 trillion on subsidy. Government made 5.5 trillion in revenue. Remove 1.15 trillion from the 5.5 trillion, gives you about 4.9 trillion. We had a budget of about 10 trillion. Then out of that 4.9 trillion, we pulled out 4.2 trillion for recurrent. So what we had last year was about 700 billion left to chase a budget of 10 trillion. So what did we do? We borrowed, we increased the deficit. The same thing is going to happen this year if we keep up those subsidy bills. Because there's going to be more variation in the number. Crude oil price now is pegged at about $85 per barrel. So the subsidy figures might increase. We already have a deficit of 7 trillion because our targeted revenue for this year is 10 trillion. If we meet up, we have a deficit of 7 trillion because we increased the budget by another 1 trillion. Then if we add the subsidy cost to it, maybe probably another 1.15 or 1.5 trillion, that's going to close to 20 trillion. Then we have to have a deficit to trim it off. What is that going to do? That's going to increase the parameters we're going to face this year. And there are a lot of economic headwinds. Mefele talked about the fact that the Fed is increasing interest rates. Also, we thought the PIA was going to open up, not the petroleum industry for me. What I was bullish for the PIA to open up was the gas sector. Because that's the richness we can tap. That's the only thing we can use as a transitory energy, to all this climate change conversation. And that's what I thought was going to bring in a lot of investment for. But setting this aside now, we can't do anything with gas. I wanted to talk further on this, but there's no time, and I have to respect my producers, so we have to go. I'm sorry. I apologize. All right, that's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Michael Wilson, Adeso Omoro, and Aaron Akeja to give us updates on global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. For global business updates, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, so basically everything looking towards what the Fed is going to say this afternoon. It's probably sort of early evening, both our times, when we're going to get what happens with Friday's minutes. It may be early afternoon. Timing, not exactly sure about that. But so therefore, Asia's stocks pretty mixed this morning, actually, as they end their trading session. Hong Kong up about 0.1%. China, tech stocks recovered slightly, Tencent and the rest of it. But here's the big one. I think that investors are going to be looking at this today. Evergrande, it has clearly some explaining to do, and it's going to hold a call with investors together with its financial advisors to give us an idea of what's actually going on there. It'll be the first call since it defaulted on some of its offshore bond payments last month, and so its shares up just very little bit. As far as the overall financial climate in China is concerned, more and more banks are saying they don't particularly want to get involved in China's overseas IPOs because they don't know what regulations are going to happen and what they will have to deal with. As far as the United States is concerned, then let's recap that. Futures up very slightly. Another wild session yesterday. The Dow Jones up overnight in futures, up about 54 points, but anything could happen. Really, there's not worth taking too many bets until most people have actually decided whether or not the Fed is going to come up with some sort of detail about what they're going to do. Most people think it's likely, therefore, that the Fed will signal a March rate increase and that further tightening is to come. Investors will also be looking at this rather interesting phenomenon: the trillion-dollar tech companies, which are now steady to report that since during the biggest market slump really since 2008. So we're going to hear from Tesla, Facebook, and all the rest of them in the next few days. It'll be very interesting. Amazon all report. Amazon, Meta, and Alphabet actually reporting next week. So it's a mixture really of this week and next to find out what's happening in tech stocks. International Monetary Fund has revised its global gross domestic product. It's expected to weaken from 5.9 to 4.4 in 2022, this year's figure being half a percentage point than previously they thought it was going to go. So they're revising their forecast all the way. As far as the UK is concerned, Boris Johnson gears up for his survival fight. We should get the details of the Downing Street parties that have been put out to an independent adjudicator, this woman Sue Gray, who's a civil servant. However, it could be that we may get an announcement about the national insurance rise, which might be delayed. Yesterday, we got some figures here saying that the government's borrowing had fallen by £13 billion over the most recent period. So in other words, there is a bit more money to play with. We'll see about that. UK key workers face a cost of living squeeze. These are people who look after the elderly, home care, social care, and the rest of it. Care home staff are among key workers. The TUC, which is the umbrella union organisation, is saying that people should be paid more, should be paid a decent wage as this cost of living crisis hits us. And in fact, the IMF, in their annual report, have actually said that as far as UK families are concerned, they are concerned that there's going to be a crunch as far as energy prices are concerned. So that's the IMF even saying that, and they've also cut their UK growth from to 4.7% from 5%, and they are saying that really something needs to be done to counter these energy price rises. And finally, oil and gold, our two favourite commodities, which we track every day, they've both jumped overnight. It's all to do with Ukraine and Russia tension and so on. And gold, at last, getting some sort of encouragement from people who flee to it in times of trouble, which we're certainly seeing right now. The Russian-Ukraine standoff will remain a tense situation for the near future. North Korea may resume its nuclear tests, and Iran nuclear talks are approaching a decisive moment. So all these kind of things adding to an enormous amount of global insecurity as we speak. That's your global view.
All right, real quickly, Michael, I want to talk about milk this morning. Something is happening in England now. When you go to the supermarket, you can't get milk. And this is the reason they're given. A lot of the ingredients used in producing milk and producing the hay, which has to do with gas, is being hampered because of the shortage of gas. And that is having a knock-on effect on the cost of milk in the market. How is the UK going to stem this tide on milk? Secondly, I want to talk about the Chinese economy. It is obvious now, with what the banks are doing in China, that there's very, very, very slow growth in China. China normally drags most economies in the world along. The IMF now has scaled down their projections for the year. Where's the silver bullet in all of this for the world economy?
There is no silver bullet for the world economy. China is facing the kind of problems that most other economies have been facing for quite a time. It's had a good ride, but it's now facing the realities of life. This is what people here think about it, that it's an aging population, fewer workers and the rest of it. That's really what's hitting China right now. So they're going to have to come to terms with this. And you know, we're seeing it in the property sector. We're seeing it in the way that they're not encouraging IPOs outside China. I've just said that banks here and banks in the United States are rebelling against that, are pushing back slightly, saying, do you know what, we don't want to get involved in this because we don't understand what the regulations are going to be. So China, it seems, is sort of, I don't know what's happening in the economy in China no more than anybody else does, because all we do is we get little bits here and there. Apparently Evergrande are going to be speaking to investors and financial advisors at some stage in the near future. Who knows what's going on there? But generally speaking, what's clearly happening is that they are now facing up to the kind of problems that other economies have had to face over the past few years, i.e. a growing old population and a less than productive workforce of younger people, and of course smaller families. So that's where China's going right now. I think we should reflect. It's not about a silver bullet. It's simply about them, I think, see how they come to terms with how they're going to develop. As far as CO2 is concerned, that's what you're talking about, the gas production. Well, people around here go to what's called a dairy, where there is no particular intervention of food processing in that, just milk straight from the cow, and that's what people tend to go for. I haven't noticed any great increase in supermarket prices, but I will be going to the supermarket later on today to stock up on some milk, apart from other things, and I'll let you know then. But as far as the CO2 thing's concerned, that's a continuing problem. Food prices have unfortunately overall added to the highest inflation rate in this country for 30 years. Whether people cut back on it, whether they actually go to dairies rather than going to supermarkets, I mean, that's something which people will just have to deal with individually.
Okay, very quickly, Michael. First, the IMF has advised Ecuador, or rather Salvador, to drop Bitcoin, which it uses as a legal tender. It acknowledges that El Salvador's economic status has improved, as we move gradually beyond the pandemic. But the big problem that El Salvador faces is the fact that it continues to use Bitcoin as illegal tender, and also in the issuance of government bonds. And that in itself constitutes a very serious financial risk. But President Nayib Bukele is saying that, well, you can see what the IMF is saying, but it's of no concern to him. Now, who is making the smarter choice here? El Salvador or the IMF? Now, in the UK, the IMF again forecast for UK growth in 2022 has been cut down from 5% to 4.7%. And the IMF is also recommending that given the crisis in Ukraine, the tension at the border between Ukraine and Russia, that the UK government will need to provide some support, within the energy sector, because energy prices are bound to rise. You recall that yesterday, I was making the point that the UK getting just about 5% of its energy from, of its gas from Russia may not be so affected because it gets most of its gas supplies from the North Sea and Norway. And you were saying, look, there's no way, the entire global supply chain would not be affected. And here is the IMF saying that the UK government may need to provide some support. And that is in line with demands by UK gas farms. So what do you think in this regard? And then there's the other unresolved issue of semiconductors. The US government, the Biden administration, is going to approach Parliament to provide more support with regard to the production of semiconductors. Because the global stock, we're told in one report, has declined heavily, and this has implications for a broad range of activities within the manufacturing sector. What do you think?
Right. So, what do you want to deal with? Should we do El Salvador first? I can't see how anybody expects to take a country like that seriously, which is adopting Bitcoin for its payments, because the fluctuations of Bitcoin speak for themselves. So, how on earth do you make payments? How on earth do you know? It is an asset that people gamble on. It's not a state-backed currency. This is what the IMF, I think, is trying to say. Well, good for them. Nothing that we haven't said on this program before. As far as the IMF itself is concerned, yes, it makes these judgments about what ought to happen. I think it's quite right that why wouldn't they say that our government needs to help people with energy prices? It's only a recommendation from them. They can have their view about it and so on. I stick with what I was saying yesterday, that as far as the UK is concerned, even though only a tiny amount of our gas, that that 5% comes from Russia. The fact of the matter is that gas prices and wholesale gas prices and wholesale energy prices are rising throughout the world right now. So we are going to be affected, as will every country be affected by this. It doesn't really matter where the source is from. If the wholesale markets, the price goes up on the wholesale markets, then everybody has to pay more. I mean, it's just the way things are at the moment. There is increasing tension about what's happening. As far as Russia's concerned, I think that what we're seeing is, and I think this is quite encouraging, it looks as though at last the United States, NATO, the EU are sort of on the same page, and what they seem to be saying is that there is a possibility that Russia could be excluded from the international SWIFT payment system, which would really harm their access to dollar markets, which the Russians actually need. This happened against Iran during the sanctions there, and happened against North Korea the year before. It's nothing strange, but it does tend to hit quite hard as a sanction. So I think that's probably what the West is actually leading towards, should Russia invade Ukraine. But as far as the energy markets are concerned, it doesn't take a genius to see that wholesale prices are going to go up everywhere.
Well, before you go, Italy is going to take a decision this week, before the week runs out, on who the next president will be. Now, Mario Draghi, the current prime minister, is one of the three persons already shortlisted. But the big concern is about political stability, the future of Italy, and how that can affect the economy. What do you imagine is likely to happen?
I think that Mario Draghi has just done what he is a technocrat, and as you quite rightly say, he's now Prime Minister of Italy, and he's now being pushed into being the President of Italy. I think it would be a big mistake for that to happen, because whatever you think about what's going on there, whatever you think about Mario Draghi, he is a technocrat. He's got his hands on the financial levers in Italy right now to try to bring some long-awaited reforms into the country. As president, he'll be head of state and won't have to do that. So he's really just saying, he's actually almost thrown his hands up in the air and said, look, I'll go wherever the country wants me to go. If I'm going to be president, then so be it. I mean, I think quite right. I think it will be a huge loss if he becomes president, because he should stay being prime minister and should continue with the reforms that Italy's economy needs. I hope he does stay as prime minister. I have no idea whether he'll become president or not, but at the moment he's a shoo-in for the role, no question.
Well, except that if he becomes president, he acquires a few more powers to appoint the prime minister and also to veto cabinet appointments and policy choices. If you were in his shoes, wouldn't you find that more attractive? Anyway, thank you, Mr.
Well, I would, but I would also see that I've got a job to do, and I think that's the responsible thing for Mario Draghi to do, to stay as prime minister and fix the Italian economy. That's the job.
Right,
whatever appears more attractive. That's the actual task that he needs to undertake.
Thank you so much, Michael. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adesola Mora joins us. Adesola, great to have you. Good morning.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Tundu, and good morning, Dr. Abati.
Morning.
Well, when it comes to the morning, guys, when it comes to COVID-19, we've definitely seen different sorts of protests against masks, as well as vaccine mandates, as well as government restrictions imposed to curb the spread of the virus, especially driven by the highly contagious Omicron variant. Well, this is as the world inches close to 360 million cases of coronavirus since the pandemic first began, and over 5.6 million people losing their lives to the virus. And like I said, we've seen different protests. Yesterday, we saw another in South Korea, where business owners shaved their heads to protest against the government's restrictions, which enforces their businesses to close on time. They say this is damaging businesses, and the only way to protest was to shave their heads yesterday. And the Johns Hopkins University says about 9.8 billion doses of vaccines have now been administered. Well, back home here in Nigeria, authorities continue to record a decline in cases as the epicenter, Lagos, announced the fourth wave has passed. In the last 24 hours, 250 cases and 7 COVID-19 related deaths were reported from 12 states as well as the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. The NPHCDA, the agency in charge of vaccination in Nigeria, gave its first briefing for the year yesterday, led by the Executive Director, Faisal Shoaib. But let me show you the latest vaccination numbers, if you have them on your screen. Over 14 million Nigerians have now received the first dose, while 5.2 million others have a second shot. The agency says about 416,000 others have received a booster shot across the 36 states as well as the Federal Capital Territory. It attributes these numbers recorded so far to the mass vaccination drive launched by the government last year. Well, at that briefing yesterday, the UNICEF country representative to Nigeria, Peter Hopkins, commended the increase in vaccination in the country and says there's still room to do more. Well, let's listen to him.
Days where over 200,000 people have been vaccinated in a day. This is an incredible achievement given where we started from. And the challenge now is to ensure that we remain at a minimum of 200,000 a day, but increase that to 300,000 a day so that we can meet our target.
In this phase of COVID-19 mass vaccination, we plan to integrate the campaign with childhood immunizations and other primary healthcare services. What this simply means is that alongside the COVID-19 vaccines, childhood vaccines will also be available at the COVID-19 vaccination sites. Consequently, parents and guardians with children aged 0 to 23 months are urged to take them along to the vaccination sites.
There are some days where...
Let's go to South Africa now, where more than 16% of contracts to help the federal government there combat COVID-19 have been irregular, according to an official report released yesterday. The country's Special Investigating Unit probed more than 4,500 contracts for the purchase of medical equipment and services worth $914 million and found that more than 2,800 of them are suspected to have been corrupt. It says additional contracts are still under investigation. President Cyril Ramaphosa revealed that report yesterday. He describes it as unacceptable, and he lamented the extent of corruption during a pandemic. Well, drug firms, science continues to win. Drug firms, Pfizer and BioNTech, have started clinical trials for vaccines that specifically target the Omicron variant of the COVID-19. The new U.S. study will include nearly 1,500 volunteers ages from 18 to 55. Vaccine makers have been working to update their shots to better match the highly contagious Omicron variant, which has been able to break through the protection of original vaccines. And in the U.S., the Biden administration has officially withdrawn a rule that would have applied to big companies with 100 or more employees to get vaccinated or face regular COVID-19 testing requirements. It comes on the day two COVID-19 antibody drugs are no longer available to doctors in the U.S. because they are ineffective against the Omicron variant. The FDA revoked the emergency authorization for the medication made by Regeneron and Eli Lilly. Back to you guys.
I want to talk about South Africa and that discovery of corruption there. And I wonder what the case is here. I wonder when we're going to get a probe here. Because what has happened in the UK, according to their statistics, 20% of their COVID contracts were corrupt, which is quite a high number for Britain, because they like to tell us how we are fantastically corrupt and they are purer than driven snow, which clearly is not the case. And a lot of things just went wrong because of the emergency nature of that pandemic. A novel virus, a novel situation, lockdowns, the usual competitive tender process could not be implemented. And so people snuck in all kinds of unsuitable behavior. And I'm sure that it happened here. And I'm really curious about what our statistics are here. Over there, you had cases of millions, like tens of millions of PPE. Those surgical gowns, they couldn't be used because they were not fit for specifications, and they had been paid for by the government. You had 50 million masks that had to be binned because they were completely useless and they had been paid for. And I really shudder to imagine what must have happened here. This is the problem, like with a war, with a crisis, any kind of crisis, it makes billionaires of certain people. It's just the way it is. And even with the testing as well, there's a huge scandal waiting to be uncovered with testing and all kinds of cowboys collecting money from the public and actually not doing any testing, just disposing of samples. That has been discovered in other countries. Again, I want to know what happened here, and I hope that somebody is looking into all of that here. We do need to know. The public deserves to know.
Rufai, do you want to go first before I come in, or I should go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, it's as follows. Look, COVID-19 has been identified as a catalyst for corruption. And we've seen many examples in the UK, in China, in other parts of the world. First, as documented in terms of complaints, presented before Transparency International, and also NEMEXIS, a Berlin-based anti-fraud international agency, indicating that one of the major problems we've had with COVID is how it facilitated corruption. And the issues involved have been identified in the Corruption Index 2020 and COVID Corruption Index 2021. Because, the WHO set up what looked like, what comes across as a corruption tracing mechanism. And in the case of South Africa, the patterns are the same. Whether in South Africa or in Tanzania, it's only in Nigeria that we have not done the audit, and people are speculating that some people have become billionaires because of COVID. But because it has not been investigated, we cannot say precisely this is what has happened in Nigeria. But we've seen in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Tanzania, reported cases, and now South Africa. South Africa has this report that has been submitted by the Special Investigation Unit. That study, that investigation was commissioned in 2020 by President Cyril Ramaphosa, following a spate of scandals that occurred in that country with regard to COVID-19 and which caused public outrage. So the 700-page report has been submitted, and in it, we're told that 224 officials have been implicated by the Special Investigation Unit, and that over 2,000 cases of procurement issues were investigated. The Democratic Alliance in South Africa, that's a political party, is saying that, look, the department in charge of corruption and investigation should go ahead and make sure that these persons are brought to book. And again, some people may say this is political. After all, in the last general elections in South Africa, the African National Congress, the ANC, lost its popularity by almost about 50% in the general polls. And part of it was this scandal around COVID and all of that. What are the major areas in which you find this corruption? One, because it's an emergency, yes. So health officials just take decisions. Now you have corruption around protective equipment, PPE, what is called the PPE. You have overinflation of contracts, as we saw in some of the countries in Central Africa. And what the WHO and other agencies have been recommending is that, look, in the face of an emergency, the lesson of all of this is that countries need to take a second look at their accountability processes and to deal with opaque financial processes within the government. So it's good to see that South Africa, which, by the way, has the largest number of case positivity rates and incidents, in Africa, is trying to investigate this. What can Nigeria learn from this? Will Nigeria put in place the same process? Will Nigeria do the same thing? I think so. I think there should be investigation because there's a lot of money involved from COVID, from everywhere. What happened to all those, isolation centers that we set up and all of that. Nobody's giving us enough record. The only state government in Nigeria that makes an attempt in that direction is the Lagos state government. No other state is giving account. So can we have an account? Can COVID also, give an account? Can a body come up and do a proper audit, following in the steps of South Africa and the guidelines that have been put in place by Transparency International and NMEX6. Now, as for the United States, the U.S. government now has decided to follow the ruling of the Supreme Court. You recall that on January 13, the Supreme Court said that the Occupational Safety and Health Association, the OSHA, was overreaching itself by saying that companies that have more than 100 staff must insist on full vaccination, or there should be weekly testing for the staff that may be involved. And here you have now the OSHA trying to step back in line with Supreme Court ruling. Well, the Supreme Court ruling, being the Supreme Court of the United States, being the court of last resort, its rulings, of course, should be respected. But generally in the United States, you have this issue about mask and vaccine mandates. And that in itself, is a big issue at the moment in Virginia, where 10 of the school districts have gone to court to say that the new governor, the Republican governor, should not insist that parents should make a choice one way or the other, because there is state law that makes, the protection of children in schools mandatory. And for the governor to say it's a matter of choice. So you have Republicans on one side, Democrats on one side. But it's not only in Virginia, it's also the case in many other parts of the United States.
Right. So, Adesuwa, we can't deny the fact that the fraud and the COVID scandal went on in many parts of the world. We all remember infamous Boris Johnson with his friends being given PPE contracts and the likes. And let's not even forget that Matt Hancock, the woman he was seen kissing on TV, her brother too got COVID contracts, and most of them didn't deliver. It was high level of corruption everywhere, even in Canada, in America was the same, and every part of the world. And South Africa, yes. Brazil, every part of the world. It was massive corruption. But I think the question is, have we really learned in terms of reacting to pandemics? Because you see, we're definitely still going to have pandemics in the world. We're as good as on our way to the next pandemic. The question is, are we ready? Have we been able to bring about global solidarity? Do we talk to ourselves really? Like Fela would ask, what is really united in this United Nations we talk about? Because we've seen the polarity. We didn't see unity. The Western nation felt too big and too greedy to give the poorer nations vaccines, albeit they gave them expired vaccines or soon to expire vaccines when they got a chance. They wouldn't release their intellectual property right when they know we're all in a pandemic, not to make money. The big pharma too became very big. They became gods unto themselves. The advisory across board saw nations fight against themselves. China and America fight against themselves so hard. At some point, let me use the local parlance, column B. China, column B, the World Health Organization. And Donald Trump wasn't buying any of it, and he stopped funding the World Health Organization or reduced the funding. So the question is, have we really learned anything? Nothing. And that's why I think the narrative should be around global solidarity. How we can quickly make new vaccines somewhere in Nagasaki in Japan, and we can get the vaccine to vaccinate people in Onokulobo in Abeokuta. I think that's the global solidarity we should look at in all of this. And the reality is that we're not learning. It's all about for us by us. It's the FUBU mentality that has ruined us. And for good measure, people died as a result of COVID. And this death could have been avoided. I hope we learn. Thank you, Adesuwa. I really appreciate you.